The Zanari High Command howled with laughter as they watched the footage of the puny human and his pathetic pet investigating the perimeter of their top-secret jungle base. Little did they know, their mocking laughter would soon turn to agonized death screams as humanity showed them the true meaning of having their asses handed to them. Jeffrey Davis, a human xenobiologist, had eagerly accepted the invitation from the Zanari to study the fascinating creatures on Xenos Prime. Arriving alongside other scientists and his loyal Neo dog named Max, Jeffrey hoped this would be the research opportunity of a lifetime. He didn't realize that his innate human curiosity would soon drag humanity into a vicious interstellar war. "Look at the funny little human and his small fuzzy companion," chirped Commander Xyloth, his beak clicking with amusement. "They actually think those genetics experiments are worthy of being called pets. How ridiculous!" What the Zanari didn't understand was the unbreakable bond between humans and dogs, forged over millennia, a bond that would drive humanity to unleash utter hell on anyone who threatened their loyal canine friends. Jeffrey and Max had unwittingly uncovered the Zanari's invasive secret, but the birds were too arrogant to see humans as anything more than a joke. A fatal mistake, one that would see Xenos Prime and dozens of Zanari colonies burned into radioactive cinders as the full might of the Terran military smashed the avian's delicate empire into fragments. The Zanari had poked a slumbering dragon one too many times. Humanity was awake now, and its wrath would be legendary. Linux here again recounting that pivotal moment when the arrogant Zanari found out how much they had fucked up. It was under the cover of darkness that Jeffrey Davis and his faithful Neo-dog Max infiltrated the Zanari's top-secret military base. Max's genetically enhanced senses allowed him to guide Jeffrey past the security perimeter, avoiding the patrols and surveillance drones. Jeffrey's quick thinking helped them hack through locked doors and dodge alarm systems. Once inside, they made a horrifying discovery in the base's central lab. The Zanari were developing biological weapons tailored to target the genetics of specific species, including humans. Jeffrey accessed a terminal and began downloading the weapons data. That's when a Zanari guard burst into the lab, squawking an alarm and firing his laser rifle. But Max was faster. The loyal Neo-dog leapt in front of his human, taking the searing laser blast himself with a pained yelp. Jeffrey cried out in anguish but kept downloading the schematics. Max snarled and launched himself at the guard, savaging him with fangs and claws. The Zanari fell in a bloody heap as Jeffrey finished the download. He knelt and scooped up Max, who whimpered weakly, his fur burnt and bloody. Jeffrey fled into the night with his mortally wounded companion, tears stinging his eyes. He knew Max's sacrifice had bought humanity a fighting chance, but the poor fool had no idea of the firestorm he had just ignited. See the Zanari High Command? They saw humans as soft, sentimental fools for loving their pitifully inferior pets. What they failed to realize was that a human's love for their dog was a force of nature, raw and unrelenting. An insult to a human's canine companion was a death wish. Jeffrey brought Max's broken body and the biological weapons intel back to the human delegation. With barely restrained fury, he showed the evidence of the Zanari's genocidal plans to his superiors. The humans now understood the depths of the Zanari's cruelty and their threat to humanity's very existence. And so, with grim resolve, humankind began preparing for war. The Zanari wanted to play dirty, but they had no idea what they had started. The birds were about to learn that you should let sleeping dogs lie, because if you kick them, they'll rip your fucking throat out. Humanity was ready to bring the Zanari to heel permanently. Jeffrey Davis became a man possessed, driven by the memory of Max's sacrifice and the unyielding need to make the Zanari pay. Command saw the fire in his eyes and tasked him with leading a critical mission. They needed someone unafraid to strike at the enemy's heart, and Jeffrey was their guy. The target was a major Zanari bioweapons lab on some backwater moon. Jeffrey handpicked a team of stone-cold killers from the Terran Special Forces, but his secret weapon? A new pack of genetically enhanced Neo-dogs, each one smarter, faster, and deadlier than the last. These pups were bred for war. Under the cover of a moonless night, Jeffrey and his crew slipped past the lab's outer defenses. The neo-dogs moved like shadows, guiding the team around patrols and silently taking out sentries. They hacked through the reinforced blast doors and stormed the facility, guns blazing. The Zanari scientists barely had time to squawk before they were gunned down. Jeffrey's guys planted charges on every piece of equipment in sight, while the neo-dogs sniffed out hidden rooms and storage areas. But what they found sent a chill down Jeffrey's spine. The birds weren't just cooking up small batches of their gene-tailored plagues. They were mass-producing that shit. Vats of the stuff, ready to be loaded into warheads. The Zanari were gearing up for genocide. Jeffrey gritted his teeth and gave the order to blow the place sky-high. They fled the complex as explosions ripped through the labs, turning the Zanari's dreams of conquest into ash. But the Zanari were done playing nice. They decided to stop dicking around and show humanity what real war looked like. I bet those birds really thought they were clever when they launched a surprise attack on the human colony of New Edison. Except their surprise was a bunch of biobombs raining down on civilians. The Zanari wanted to make an example of the colony, to show all humans what happened when you fucked with the flock. At first it looked like the Zanari's plan was working. People started dropping left and right, puking their guts out and bleeding from every hole they had. It was a fucking nightmare. But then something strange happened. The neo-dogs, the loyal pups that lived alongside the colonists, they weren't getting sick, not even a sniffle. Turned out their engineered DNA was different enough from the baseline human genome that the plague couldn't touch them. And so while their human pals were busy dying all around them, the neo-dogs did what they did best. They started hauling people to the evac shuttles, barking out warnings, and generally being the goodest boys and girls in the whole damn galaxy. Thanks to those brave pooches, a hell of a lot more colonists made it out alive than would have otherwise. But the cost? The cost was high. A lot of those dogs worked themselves to death, literally, trying to save as many as they could. That's when it clicked for the Terran High Command. These neo-dogs weren't just pets or even loyal companions. They were fucking warriors, ready to fight and die for their humans, and if the Zanari wanted to play dirty with their fancy gene plagues, then it was time to unleash mankind's oldest and furriest allies. Jeffrey knew what he had to do. He threw himself into training a new generation of neo-dogs, bred specifically to rip the Zanari a new cloaca. These dogs would be humanity's vengeance, and Jeffrey would lead them into battle. The Zanari wanted a war of genetic annihilation. Well, they were about to learn that when you mess with the big dog, you get the teeth. Jeffrey and his pack of neo-dogs tore through the Zanari lines like a hot knife through butter. The birds squawked in terror as the snarling, gene-hacked killing machines closed in, ripping out throats and shredding flesh with ruthless efficiency. The Zanari commanders watched in disbelief as their soldiers fell by the dozen, overwhelmed by the ferocity of Jeffrey's pack. They'd underestimated the humans' bond with their canine companions, and now they were paying the price in blood. Linux here again, and let me tell you, it was a sight to behold. Jeffrey and his dogs moved like a well-oiled machine, anticipating each other's every move. The Zanari never stood a chance. But the real game-changer came during a raid on a Zanari supply depot. As Jeffrey and his team tore through the facility, they stumbled upon a gold mine of intel. The birds were planning something big, a full-scale assault on Earth itself. Jeffrey's blood ran cold as he pored over the stolen data. The Zanari had amassed a massive fleet, armed to the beak with their gene-tailored bioweapons. They were going to wipe humanity off the galactic map. There was no time to lose. Jeffrey rallied his pack and set off on a desperate mission to intercept the Zanari armada before it could reach human space. It was a hell of a long shot, but what choice did they have? The ensuing space battle was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Jeffrey and his neo-dogs, clad in sleek armored spacesuits, boarded the Zanari flagship, carving a path of destruction through the ship's cramped corridors. They fought their way to the bridge, where the Zenari commander squawked in terror at the sight of the human and his snarling pack. The bastard was about to give the order to deploy the bioweapons when Jeffrey and Arya, his lead neo-dog, made their move. In a desperate, reckless act of sacrifice, Jeffrey and Arya charged the commander, ignoring the hail of laser fire raining down on them. The data they'd stolen from the supply depot had revealed a fatal flaw in the ship's reactor containment system, a weakness they could exploit. Jeffrey slammed his fist down on the destruct sequence as Arya ripped out the commander's throat. The flagship shuddered and then went nova, consuming Jeffrey and the other neo-dogs in a blaze of searing light. But their sacrifice wasn't in vain. The explosion tore through the Zenari fleet, igniting their bioweapon stockpiles in a chain reaction of destruction. In one fell swoop, Jeffrey and Arya had crippled the Zenari's ability to wage biological war. It was a turning point in the conflict, one that would forever change the Zenari's perception of humans and their neo-dog allies. The birds had thought they could crush humanity under their talons, but they'd underestimated the power of the bond between man and dog. But the war was far from over. The Zenari still had plenty of fight left in them, and they were already regrouping for their next move. Humanity had won a crucial battle, but the war for the galaxy's future was just beginning. Linux here again, continuing the tale of humanity's bitter struggle against the Zenari menace. Even after Jeffrey and Arya's heroic sacrifice crippled the Zenari's bioweapon capabilities, the war ground on in a brutal stalemate. Both sides were bloodied and battered, but neither was ready to back down. The Zenari, though, they weren't about to just sit on their feathered asses and let the humans gain the upper hand. No, those crafty birds had a new trick up their scaly sleeves. They started cooking up their own brand of genetically engineered horrors to match humanity's neo-dogs. Intel soon reached human high command about these new abominations, the Zengaru. Mean green killing machines, these reptilian nightmares were bred for one purpose, to rip humanity a new one. Faster, tougher, and uglier than a week-old roadkill, the Zengaru hit human forces like a ton of bricks. Suddenly the tide was turning. Human soldiers found themselves outmatched by these scaly terrors, their neo-dog companions struggling to keep up. The Zenari pressed their advantage, pushing humanity back on every front. But humanity wasn't about to roll over and die. No, our scientists started playing God even harder than before. They took the neo-dogs back to the drawing board, cranking up the genetic enhancements to 11. The next generation of neo-dogs? They made the old breed look like cuddly puppies. These new warhounds were the stuff of nightmares, all teeth, claws, and barely restrained aggression. They could go toe-to-toe with the Zengaru and come out on top 9 times out of 10. There was a catch, though. See, when you start messing with a creature's genome like it's a damn Rubik's Cube, things can get a little unpredictable. These new neo-dogs, they were loose cannons. One minute they're tearing into the enemy ranks, the next they're turning on their human handlers. Reports started flooding in from all over the front lines. Rogue neo-dogs attacking friend and foe alike, leaving a trail of carnage in their wake. It was like humanity had unleashed a second enemy on the battlefield, one that we couldn't control. As the narrator of this whole shit show, I got to ask, did we go too far? In our desperation to beat the Zenari, did we create something even worse? I look at these new neo-dogs, these living weapons we've unleashed, and I can't help but wonder if we've doomed ourselves in the process. The war rages on, but now it's not just us against the Zenari. It's us against them, and maybe, just maybe, against the very monsters we've created to save ourselves. I've seen a lot of messed up things in my time, but this takes the cake. Linux here, recounting yet another twist in humanity's desperate struggle against the Zenari and their own twisted creations. As the war ground on, with no clear victor in sight, a new player stepped onto the blood-soaked stage. Captain Marcus Wright was a man haunted by his past, a soldier who'd seen too much, lost too much. His neo-dog companion, a loyal beast named Shadow, had fallen in battle, leaving a hole in Marcus's heart that nothing could fill. But the brass had a mission for him, one that could turn the tide of the war. Marcus found himself leading a hand-picked team of hardened veterans and neo-dog warriors, each one tougher than a coffin nail. Their target, a Zenari research facility deep in enemy territory, rumored to be the birthplace of the dreaded Zengaru. Infiltrating the complex was no cakewalk. The Zenari had the place locked down tighter than a miser's purse, but Marcus and his team were the best of the best. They slipped past the outer defenses like ghosts, neo-dogs taking point, sniffing out trouble before it could rear its ugly head. Inside, though, that's when things got hairy. The team battled their way through the facility, trading laser fire with Zenari guards and their Zengaru abominations. Marcus watched as men he'd fought beside for years fell, their blood mingling with that of their neo-dog companions. But they pushed on, driven by a grim determination to uncover the truth, and when they reached the heart of the complex, what they found there was enough to turn even the strongest stomach. The Zenari, in their mad quest for victory, had been playing God. They were splicing human and Zenari DNA, cooking up a whole new breed of horror in their labs. The Zengaru were just the beginning, the failed prototypes. What the birds were really after was a super soldier, a killing machine with the cunning of a human and the raw savagery of a Zenari. Marcus and his team, they knew they had to put a stop to this madness. They raced through the facility, planting charges, setting the whole damn place to blow. But the Zengaru, they weren't about to let their creator's work be destroyed so easily. It was a fighting retreat, every step paid for in blood. Marcus watched as his team dwindled, picked off one by the relentless Zengaru. By the time they made it out, detonating the charges and sending the facility up in a ball of plasma fire, only a handful were left standing. As the survivors stumbled back to their extraction point, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what the hell they were fighting for anymore. The lines between right and wrong, human and monster, they'd all started to blur. Both sides had committed atrocities, crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. But one thing was clear in Marcus's mind. This war, it had to end. Too many good men and dogs had given their lives already. If it went on much longer, there might not be anything left worth saving. He looked at the haggard faces of his remaining team, human and neo-dog alike. They'd seen the abyss, stared into the heart of darkness, and they knew, just as he did, that they had to find a way to end this before it was too late, before both races destroyed each other in their mad rush for victory. Linux here again, following the bitter struggle between humanity and the Zenari as it reached new depths of brutality and despair. Marcus Wright and his battle-hardened team had seen the abyss, the twisted heart of the Zenari's genetic experiments. The truth they uncovered was enough to turn even the strongest stomach. With grim resolve, Marcus and his crew set out to expose the Zenari's depravity to the galaxy. They blasted the footage of the Zengaru's creation across every frequency, hacked into every newsfeed. The evidence of the birds' willingness to toss ethics out the airlock in their mad grab for power was laid bare for all to see. The revelations hit both sides like a plasma bomb. Protests erupted on a dozen worlds, humans and Zenari alike, demanding an end to the bloodshed. It seemed like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for peace. But there's always some asshole who just won't let go, ain't there? Enter General Zaxxas, a real piece of work even by Zenari standards. This feathered fuck was harder than a diamond dildo, and twice as mean. He and his cronies weren't about to let a little thing like public outcry get in the way of their plans. So what does this walking, squawking war crime do? He launches an all-out assault on a human civilian colony, that's what. And he doesn't just use any old weapons. Oh no. The sick bastard deploys a new strain of the bioweapon, one that doesn't give a shit whether you're human, neo-dog, or a goddamn potted plant. If you're alive, it'll kill you. The attack was a fucking massacre. Thousands dead, even more maimed and dying. It was like hell itself had spilled over onto that poor, unsuspecting colony. But for Marcus, it was more than just another atrocity in an endless fucking war. His brother, the one he hadn't spoken to in years, had been living on that colony with his family. Emphasis on the had been. They were all dead now, just more faces in the ever-growing gallery of the lost. Something in Marcus broke that day. The last shred of mercy, of humanity, that he'd been clinging to all these years, it just fucking shattered. In its place there was only rage, white-hot and all-consuming. He rallied his team, those hard-bitten survivors who'd seen the worst the war had to offer, and just kept going. They had a new mission now, and fuck orders, fuck the chain of command. They were going to find Zaxxus, and they were going to make that feathered fuck pay. As the narrator of this whole goddamn tragedy, I've seen my share of revenge quests. I've watched good men and women consumed by their need for vengeance, until there's nothing left but a hollow shell filled with pain and hate. But Marcus, there was something different about him. It wasn't just revenge he was after, it was justice, the kind you make with your own two hands when the universe fucks you over one time too many. I watched as he and his team set out into the void, hunting Zaxxus like the rabid dog he was. They were a force of nature, unstoppable and unrelenting. Heaven help any poor bastard who got in their way. The stage was set for a reckoning, a final bloody showdown between the last shreds of decency in this fucked-up galaxy and the forces that would see it all burn. Marcus and Zaxxus, two sides of the same blood-stained coin, hurtling towards each other on a collision course that could only end one way. I wish I could tell you how it all shook out, but the truth is I don't fucking know, not yet anyway. All I know is that whatever happens next, it's going to be ugly. The kind of ugly that leaves scars, the kind you can't ever really heal from. But then again, ain't that the story of this whole damn war? Just one scar after another, until you can't even remember what it felt like to be whole. I look at Marcus, at his team, and I see the same thing I see when I look in the mirror. The walking wounded, soldiers fighting a war that maybe, just maybe, can't ever really be won. But we keep fighting anyway, don't we? Because what else is there? What else is left when you've seen the things we've seen, done the things we've done? You keep going, keep putting one foot in front of the other, until you can't anymore, until the day comes when the universe finally, mercifully lets you rest. That day ain't here yet, though. Not for me, not for Marcus, not for any of us poor bastards still caught up in this meat grinder of a war. We've got miles to go before we sleep, and a whole lot of ugly still ahead of us. So I'll keep watching, keep telling this story, even if it sometimes feels like screaming into the void. Because someone's got to remember, someone's got to make sure the truth doesn't get lost in all the blood and rubble. And who knows? Maybe one day when the guns finally fall silent and the last of us old soldiers fades away, some bright-eyed kid will stumble across these records. Maybe they'll read these words and think, shit, that must have been one hell of a thing to live through. And they'll be right. It is. But we lived through it all the same, didn't we? We endured like we always fucking do. So here's to you, Marcus. Give 'em hell, you beautiful broken bastard. Give 'em hell and then some. Plynek's back again. So Marcus and his crew, they finally tracked down that squawking shit-stained Zaxxus to some backwater Zenari outpost. The place was guarded tighter than a nun's asshole, but that didn't stop our boy Marcus. He had a score to settle, and by God, he was going to settle it. The team hit the outpost like a fucking tsunami. Neo-dogs ripped into the Zenari guards, painting the walls with blood and feathers. Marcus charged through the chaos, his eyes locked on the command center where Zaxxus was holed up. He blasted the door open and stormed inside, face to face with the bastard who'd taken everything from him. Zaxxus squawked in surprise, but he recovered fast. The two of them clashed in the middle of the room, a whirlwind of fists and fury. And Zaxxus? The fucker gave as good as he got. He was a tough old bird, I'll give him that. The two of them beat the ever-loving shit out of each other, smashing through furniture and consoles like they were made of fucking cardboard. But in the end, Marcus had Zaxxus on his knees, beaten to a bloody pulp. He had his hands around the bastard's throat, ready to squeeze the life out of him once and for all. And then he hesitated. I could see it in his eyes, the moment when he realized that killing Zaxxus wouldn't bring back the dead. It wouldn't erase the horrors of the war or heal the scars on his soul. In that split second of doubt, Zaxxus made his move. He lashed out with a hidden blade, slicing open Marcus's arm and squirming free of his grasp. The Zenari general staggered to his feet and ran like the coward he was, leaving Marcus bleeding and shaken. By the time Marcus pulled himself together and gave chase, Zaxus had vanished, escaped in a waiting ship, leaving his troops to die for his sorry ass. Marcus and his team mopped up the rest of the outpost, but the taste of victory was bitter on their tongues. They'd come so close to ending Zaxus, to getting some kind of justice for all the lives he'd destroyed, but in the end, the fucker had slipped through their fingers. Marcus was still licking his wounds when the message came through. A high-level Zenari diplomat, some fuck named Zelos, wanted to meet with him, claimed he had a proposal that could end the war once and for all. Now, Marcus? He was no fool. He knew a trap when he smelled one. But there was something about Zelos's message that intrigued him. A hint of desperation, maybe, or a glimmer of genuine hope. Against his better judgment, Marcus agreed to the meeting. He picked a neutral site, some shithole of a planet where neither side had any real presence. If Zelos tried to pull anything, Marcus would be ready. But when he arrived at the coordinates Zelos had sent, Marcus was in for a surprise. The Zenari diplomat was there, all right, but he was alone. No guards, no weapons, just a tired-looking bird with a briefcase full of documents. Zelos laid it all out for Marcus, said that more and more Zenari were sick of the war, sick of the endless cycle of death and destruction. They wanted peace, but they couldn't achieve it with hardliners like Zaxus still in power. That's where Marcus came in. Zelos wanted to form a joint task force, humans and Zenari working together to hunt down the warmongers on both sides. It was a crazy idea, but crazy was all they had left. Marcus listened to Zelos's pitch, his mind racing. He thought of all the friends he'd lost, all the innocents who'd died because of this stupid fucking war. If there was even a chance that Zelos was on the level, didn't he owe it to them to try? In the end, Marcus agreed to the plan. He shook Zelos's hand, sealing the deal between two races that had been at each other's throats for so long. It was a moment of hope, fragile and uncertain, but real all the same. As Marcus walked away from the meeting, he couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose that he hadn't known in years. The road ahead would be long and hard, and there were sure to be plenty who opposed the idea of peace. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus believed that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this hell. A way to build a future that wasn't soaked in blood and tears. Of course, I've been around long enough to know that hope is a dangerous thing. It can lift you up, sure, but it can also crush you when it all comes crashing down. Marcus and Zelos, they were taking a big gamble. Trying to forge an alliance between two species that had every reason to hate each other's guts. It was a noble idea, but the universe has a way of chewing up noble ideas and spitting them out broken and bloody. I've seen a lot of shit in my time, but this was something new. A human and a Zenari putting aside their differences and working together for the greater good. It was like something out of a fucking fairy tale. But I guess that's the thing about fairy tales. They're not real, and in the real world happy endings are hard to come by. Marcus and Zelos, they had their work cut out for them. They were going to piss off a lot of people on both sides, people who had a vested interest in keeping the war going. There would be betrayals and setbacks, moments when it all seemed hopeless. But if there's one thing I've learned about humans, it's that they're a stubborn bunch. When they set their minds to something, they don't give up easy. So maybe, just maybe, Marcus and Zelos had a shot at pulling this off, at finding a way to end the war and build a future where humans and Zenari could coexist in something other than constant fucking conflict. It was a long shot, but what else was new? In a galaxy gone mad, sometimes the crazy ideas are the only ones worth fighting for. And fight they would. Marcus and Zelos and all the brave souls who followed them into the breach. They'd fight for peace even if it killed them. Because in the end, what other choice did they have? Keep on killing each other until there was nothing left but ashes and regrets? Fuck that noise. No, they'd take the hard road, the one paved with blood and sacrifice, and maybe, just maybe, they'd come out the other side with something worth living for. It was a hell of a thing to pin your hopes on, but in a universe where the rules had long since gone out the window, hope was all they had left. Linux here again, and let me tell you, the road to peace was about as smooth as a Zenari's ass. Marcus and Zelos, They were trying their damnedest to get this joint task force off the ground, but it was like herding cats. Zenari cats, with laser claws and a serious attitude problem. Say, not everyone was on board with this whole let's be friends thing. On both sides you had hardliners who'd lost too much, seen too much to just let it all go. They were like, fuck that noise, I'm not working with those feathered fuck-such hairless apes. Marcus and Zelos, they were caught in the middle, trying to keep this fragile little piece together, with spit and baling wire. They were meeting with their respective brass, trying to convince them that this was the way forward. But it was like talking to a wall with a serious grudge and a twitchy trigger finger. And then, just when things were looking bleak, some asshole had to go and pour gasoline on the fire. Enter the Prophet, a grade A nutjob with a messiah complex and a hard-on for genocide. This fuck, he starts preaching to anyone who'll listen that the Neo-Dogs are like some kind of divine gift from the great dog god in the sky, says they're meant to help humanity wipe the Zenari off the face of the galaxy, and people, well, they're listening. The Prophet, he's got charisma coming out of his ass. He knows just what to say to tap into that raw, bleeding wound of loss and anger that so many humans are carrying around. He tells them that the Neo-Dogs are the key to victory, that with them at their side they can finish what they started and end the Zenari threat once and for all. And before you know it, he's got a fucking army, thousands of humans all riled up and ready to go on a holy crusade against the Zenari. They call themselves the Chosen, because of course they fucking do. Marcus and Zelos, they're scrambling to keep a lid on this shit. They're trying to reassure the Zenari that this Prophet asshole doesn't speak for all humans, that they're still committed to the peace process. But it's hard to talk peace when some fuckwit is out there blowing up Zenari civilians in the name of the great dog god. The attacks start small, but they escalate quickly. The Chosen, they're targeting Zenari colonies, outposts, anywhere they can find a soft target. They're using Neo-Dogs as living weapons, strapping bombs to them and sending them into crowds of civilians. Marcus and Zelos, they're working around the clock to try and stop these Chosen assholes before they can do any more damage. They're pooling their resources, their intel, trying to track down the Prophet and his followers. But it's like trying to catch smoke. The Prophet, he's a slippery bastard. He's always one step ahead, always ready with some grand speech about the glorious destiny of humanity and the Neo-Dogs. It's enough to make you want to put your head through a wall, but Marcus and Zelos, they don't have that luxury. They've got to find this asshole and shut him down before he can fuck things up any more than he already has. So they put together a plan, a fucking crazy plan, but it's all they've got. They're going to infiltrate the Prophet's inner circle, get close to him, and then expose him for the fraud he is. Here's a long shot, but what choice do they have? If they don't stop the Prophet, this war is never going to end. It'll just keep going, on, until there's nothing left but ashes and corpses. Marcus and Zelos, they handpick a team for the job. The best of the best, human and Zenari alike. They're going to need every bit of skill and luck they can muster if they're going to pull this off. The plan goes into motion, and it's like something out of a fucking spy vid. Marcus and his team, they're in deep cover, posing as true believers in the Prophet's cause. They're attending his rallies, nodding along to his speeches, all the while gathering intel and waiting for their moment to strike. Zelos and his crew, meanwhile, are working behind the scenes. They're hacking into the Prophet's communications, trying to trace his movements and predict his next target. It's tense as hell, and there are moments when it looks like the whole thing is going to fall apart. But Marcus and Zelos, they're determined. They've come too far to let this asshole win. And then finally they catch a break. Zelos' team intercepts a message that tips them off to the Prophet's location. He's holed up in some abandoned factory on the outskirts of a human colony, surrounded by his most loyal followers. It's now or never. Marcus and his team make their move, storming the compound in a blaze of gunfire and snarling Neo-Dogs. They fight their way to the heart of the complex, where they find the Prophet himself, preaching to his flock. But something's not right. The Prophet, he's not the towering figure of divine might that his followers believe him to be. He's just a man, a scrawny little shit with a cheap hologram rig and a talent for bullshit. The Prophet, He's sputtering and sweating, trying to come up with some excuse. But it's too late. His followers, they're starting to see through the illusion. They're realizing that they've been duped, that this whole crusade has been nothing but a lie. In the end, the Prophet's own hubris is his downfall. He tries to make a run for it, but Marcus is faster. He tackles the little shit to the ground and rips off his hologram rig, exposing him for the fraud he is. It's a fucking shit show. The Prophet's followers, they're confused and angry. Some of them lay down their weapons and surrender, but others, the true believers, they're not going down without a fight. Marcus and his team, they're in for the fight of their lives, but they've got right on their side and a whole lot of pent-up rage to fuel them. They take down the holdouts one by one until the only one left is the Prophet himself. The little fuck, he's got a look in his eye like a cornered rat. He knows it's over, but he's not going to go quietly. He starts ranting and raving, spewing all kinds of bullshit about how he's the true voice of the Neo-Dogs, how he'll be back to lead humanity to glory. Marcus, he's had enough of this shit. He shuts the Prophet up with a punch to the face and then hands him over to the authorities. The bastard's going to spend the rest of his life in a cell where he can't hurt anyone else with his lies. It's a hell of a victory, but it's not the end of the story. Not by a long shot. The Prophet may be out of the picture, but the damage he's done, it runs deep. There are still plenty of humans out there who bought into his bullshit, who still see the Zanari as the enemy. And the Zanari, they're not exactly ready to forgive and forget. They've been burned too many times, seen too many of their own slaughtered by human hands. It's going to take more than one crazy cult leader getting his ass kicked to heal those wounds. But Marcus and Zelos, they're not giving up. They know that this peace, fragile as it is worth fighting for. They've seen too much death, too much suffering, to let it all be for nothing. So they keep pushing forward, one day at a time. They keep building bridges, keep trying to find common ground between their two species. It's not easy, and there are setbacks and challenges at every turn. But they're not alone. There are others, human and Zanari alike, who share their vision of a future where their two races can coexist in something other than endless war. They're the ones who will carry on the fight, long after Marcus and Zelos are gone. It's a hell of a thing when you think about it. Two species so different, so divided by hatred and fear, somehow finding a way to come together. It's like something out of a fucking fairy tale. But then again, that's the thing about fairy tales. They're not just stories, they're something to aspire to, something to believe in even when the world around us is going to shit. And who knows, maybe one day if we fight hard enough and long enough we'll get our happily ever after, or maybe we'll all just die trying. Either way, it's a hell of a lot better than the alternative, because let me tell you, living in a galaxy torn apart by war, that's no fucking fairy tale. That's just a nightmare, plain and simple. But as long as there are people like Marcus and Zelos out there, people willing to stand up and fight for what's right, well, that gives me hope. And in a universe gone mad, hope is a precious fucking commodity. So here's to the peacemakers, the bridge builders, the crazy bastards who look at a galaxy on fire and say, fuck it, let's try something different. They're the real heroes of this story, even if nobody ever writes a fucking fairy tale about them. And me? I'm just the asshole who gets to tell their story. It's not much, but it's something, and in a war like this, something is a hell of a lot better than nothing. Linux here again, and let me tell you, the final chapter of this war was a real fucking shit show. Marcus and Zelos, they knew they had to end this thing once and for all, so they put together a team, the best of the best from both sides. Humans and Zanari working together. Can you believe it? They'd gotten intel that General Zaxxas and the Prophet, those two genocidal fuckwits, had teamed up. Yeah, I know, it's like a match made in hell. They'd holed up on some backwater planet, probably plotting how to fuck over the galaxy one more time. So Marcus and Zelos, they lead the charge. It was like something out of a goddamn action vid. Ships dropping out of hyperspace, soldiers storming the compound, lasers flying everywhere. But let me tell you, it was brutal. The Zanari, they had those fucking Zengaru, and the Prophet had his crazed followers. It was like walking into a meat grinder. I watched good soldiers, human and Zanari alike, get torn to shreds. And then, just when it seemed like they might pull through, the worst happened. Zelos, he was leading a charge trying to break through to the inner compound, And that's when one of those fucking Zengaroo got him. Tore him apart like he was made of fucking paper. Marcus, he saw it happen. I could see it in his eyes the moment he realized he was alone. That it was all on him now. He fought like a man possessed, carved his way through the compound, neo-dogs at his side, until he came face to face with Zaxus himself. And let me tell you, that was a fight for the ages. They went at it, hand to hand, no quarter given. Marcus, he was bleeding from a dozen wounds, but he kept going. He had to. For Zelos. For everyone who died in this fucking war. In the end he did it, put Zaxus down for good. But the prophet, that slippery fuck, he got away, disappeared into the chaos, probably off to lick his wounds and plot his revenge. And Marcus, he stood there among the ruins, surrounded by the dead and the dying. He'd won, but fuck, at what cost? The war was over. But the scars, they run deep. There's a lot of anger out there, a lot of hate. It's going to take time to heal if it ever really does. And me. I'm just a tired old soldier trying to make sense of it all. I've seen a lot of shit in my day, but this was something else. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll ever really have peace, but I do know one thing. As long as there are people like Marcus out there, people willing to fight for what's right, we've got a chance. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be setbacks, challenges, and a whole lot of fucking pain along the way, but we have to try. We owe it to everyone who gave their lives, to everyone who suffered. So that's it, I guess. The story of the war between the humans and the Zenari. It's not a pretty story, but it's an important one. And maybe, just maybe, if we can learn from it, if we can find a way to put aside our differences and work together, we might just have a shot at building something better. But hey, what the fuck do I know? I'm just a grizzled old vet with too many scars and too many stories, and this is just one more story in a galaxy full of them. Linux out. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.